Hello everyone, welcome to the In Out Crowd, our mini-mentory where we discuss and dissect all things queer from present and past years. I didn't even mean that to rhyme, I'm just that fabulous. It is of course the month of June, which is our little pot of gold across a rainbow of the year. And it's of course Pride Month. While we encourage celebrating and commemorating our community throughout the entire year, Pride Months can be a great way to take stock of where we are as rainbow children, both locally and globally, where we're going, and maybe most importantly, where we've came from. To start off, we're going to have a look at some of these historical events in Scotland and the rest of the UK. Some are lovely, some are ugly, and as Regina George would say, some are just plain fugly. Nevertheless, you don't need a library card for this segment. It's Queerstory time. So with the topic of Queerstory, we could go anywhere with it. To start off with though, we're going to be looking at legislation relating to LGBTQ+ issues from the 1500s to the 1800s. Now didn't click off just yet, right? I know how that sounds, but trust me, we're starting off with a good one. The 1533 Buggery Act. Note that that was their words, not mine, okay? This was an act of parliament that moved the issue of that kind of intimacy from ecclesiastical courts now to a state level. But what's most interesting, if you can use that word, is that contrary to the assumptions of many, myself included, this actually wasn't an act that explicitly targeted gay men, but in fact the Buggery Act of 1533 applied to everyone regardless of their gender engaging in that act of intimacy. So I guess equality? Don't worry though, we're not leaving this particular topic alone just yet, as now we're going to move on to the 1828 Buggery Act, repealed. I personally would have went for something more like Buggery Act 2.0 or Electric Boogaloo, but that's not the point. Anyway, still their words, no mine. But this is when our initial act, talked about in, 1533, was replaced with something new, named the Offences Against the Person Act. And you thought our current government was vague. Don't worry though, I'll let you know all the deets. This new language, as part of the refurbished law, didn't focus on opposite sex couples anymore. Now it was focused to, you guessed it, just male same-sex activity. At this point, any men who engaged in the, act of intimacy, run that side, with other men, remained punishable by death, whereas now, opposite sexes were free to roam this option, if you will. Considering that actually this is still the case in many countries even today, really makes you realise how much of a load of bull-friendly beef Wellington it is. And that's my words, no theirs. Sticking on with our 1800s theme, we're now going to move to 1885, which is when the Criminal Law Amendment Act was passed. Now, part of this act was used to prosecute those who had engaged in, quote, any acts of gross indecency with male persons. Additionally, this act reduced the previous minimum term of hard labour for those charged with this gross indecency from 10 years to 2 years. Small wins, I suppose. And that, my friends, was your Queerstory time. That's bra. Although we don't have to look so far back into history to see the kind of effects that social and political issues have had on our community. For example, the effects of the HIV/AIDS epidemic of the 80s and 90s are still very much felt today, from the positive to the devastating. For example, We have gained so much learning and understanding about HIV. Simultaneously, we've seen equal amounts of stigma against sex and perceived promiscuity of queer sexualities. On top of that, as many legal wins that we might have seen in the UK and America over the decades, we have seen an influx of social media pushback from TERFs of Twitter and swerfs of Insta to an overall rise of documented hate crimes. There is one artist who embodies the bittersweet, cautious optimism of LGBTQ+ history and culture. An icon of queer art and social justice alike, Keith Haring. As part of our work in progress productions Small Town Boys, we looked at the evolution of Haring's work across his active years, especially how his artwork developed after his HIV diagnosis, which unfortunately ultimately caused his death soon after. We also included various newspaper headlines as part of this research, particularly ones that directly attacked our community in relation to the HIV virus, saying it was a gay plague and it specifically targeted gay men in our community. Now, I wonder what kind of insensitive newspapers would ever say something like that ever again. Nevertheless, with these inspirations, we created a movement segment inspired by Haring's art style, specifically his Once Upon a Time bathroom mural, his artistic message, and the aforementioned mass media attacks and misinformation that deeply affected our community and only exacerbated the stigma of HIV/AIDS at this time and the times following. This segment, part of our wider research for LGBTQ+ productions and projects, Headlines.